Hello, everybody. Good morning. Good morning if you're in the US. Good afternoon if you're in Europe, and welcome for a new webinar from Iceberg Data Lab. Today, I am with my colleagues Leif and Thomas, who are two important people at Iceberg. Leif is our product owner, and Thomas is our climate modeler. And today we will we'll talk about two indicators that are well used within financial institutions. It's on the one hand, the SBTi, so the Science-Based Target Initiative, and we will compare it with our indicator at Iceberg Data Lab, which is SB2A, Science-Based 2-degree alignment. So why did we create this indicator? We will explain to you, but we are actually using the SBTi within our indicator. SBTi is a global organization. It was founded in 2015 by a consortium of organizations, CDP, the UN Global Compact, the WWF, and it helps financial institutions set greenhouse gas emissions reduction targets. But what we have noticed with time is that some financial institutions were coming to us to have some more granular data, to be more precise in their reduction targets or in assessing the impact in terms of temperature alignment of their portfolio. And that's why we developed that tool. So we'll do a brief introduction about Iceberg Data Lab. Then we'll move to the first product, the climate ratings that we offer. And then we'll switch to the methodology behind SB2A and how it compares with SBTi. Finally, we'll talk about concrete use cases so you can understand how our clients, financial institutions, buy side, sell side around the world use our data. So for the people who join us for the first time, Iceberg Data Lab, we are biodiversity and climate experts. So we are a European startup, tech company, green fintech, we should say. We specialize in calculating impact of listed corporates, mostly on the environment. On the environment, what does it mean? It's the impact on climate, as we will discuss today, or the impact on biodiversity. That's our expertise, biodiversity, and we are really the leader in Europe for biodiversity impact data. We analyze companies' impact across all scopes, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, upstream and downstream. That's a strong unique selling point of Iceberg Data Lab, the granularity of the data, and especially on the scope 3, where a lot of our competitors struggle to modelize the data. How are we able to do so? It's about the depth of our database. And as you can see, we have 2,300 goods and services analyzed within our model. So we analyze all supply chains, supplier, clients, which goods are consumed by the companies, which goods or services are produced. And in total, it's more than 2,000 goods and services that we use. Our coverage is more than 9,000 listed companies today, reaching almost 10,000. And we produce a lot of indicators for private companies as well. For example, private equity funds come to us so we can produce for them biodiversity and climate indicators. Finally, one important point to mention is the strong scientific backing of our work. We are, on the one hand, very close to university research departments all over the world that use our data to produce papers and research on sustainable finance. They are all available, and so please have a look at them. And at the same time, we have a scientific committee that meets quarterly and validates all methodological updates or all new indicators from Iceberg Data Lab. around the table of this scientific committee sits an international organization like the WWF, for example. So that shows our stronger scientific backing. What do we produce? Climate solutions, biodiversity solutions. Today we'll focus on the left-hand side. We have carbon footprint, SB2A, which is the tool, the indicator we will discuss today, but we have also positive contribution and physical and transition risk. That's for climate. On the biodiversity side, our flagship indicator is the CBF, corporate biodiversity footprint, and we have plenty of other indicators such as deforestation or sensitive area flag for the assets of companies. Please join all our other webinars when we discuss biodiversity. We help financial institutions do their reporting. You see at the top of the screen, such as TCFD, TNFD reporting, Article 29 in France, or SFDR on a European level. And the concrete use case at the bottom of the screen, our clients use our data to do selection, exclusion of the worst in class, for example, but as well to monitor their portfolio with a target, such as SB2A, temperature target, as we will see today. But they use our data as well to do engagement, stewardship with companies, or to create ETFs or indices. Those are the people we work with, and we'll kick off with the presentation. Just one note on the Q&A. There's a Q&A in this session, so please ask all your questions. It's at the bottom right-hand side of the screen. Ask all your questions. My colleague Arthur and Sophia are answering to you real time, and they have questions for you as well, so you can already answer to the poll they published. So, Thomas, hi, thanks for joining. Can you tell us a bit more about SB2A, SBTi, and maybe to start about what we calculate in climate and maybe the climate ratings?
Yes, of course. Thank you. Hi, everyone. So yeah, first, before starting with going into depth into the SB2A methodology, first let's look at what are the final products we publish for free basically on our website, which is the climate rating. And basically we rank companies into 6 categories, from leader for companies that are 1.5 degrees aligned for Paris Agreement, to the worst companies that are classified as laggard, and for which they have a temperature above 4 degrees. So basically, to give this rating, we need to estimate temperature, and that's our SB2A that I will describe now more precisely. But before going into depth into the methodology, first a small reminder and precision about the Iceberg Data Lab approach. Indeed, the core of our approach is based on the notion of domain service. And this notion is that we don't consider the emission intensity in terms of emissions per $1 million or dollars revenue or other kind of financial flows, but in terms of the physical services and contribution to the society of a given activity. So for example, if that's a company that produces electricity, we will talk of emissions of GHG in terms of per kilowatt hour. If it's an energy company, we will talk of emissions of GHG in terms of gigajoules. If it's a transportation company, if it's more about passenger transport, we will talk about CO2 emissions per passenger kilometer or CO2 emissions per ton kilometer if we talk about freight transport.
This is a very important feature of Iceberg Data Lab. So it enables us to remove the bias of sales or big companies that have large turnovers. So in terms of the analysis of car makers, for example, it enables us to remove from low carbon indices that we create, some car makers that will get in with the other data providers.
Yeah, and so every GHG impact will be presented and calculated using this ton of CO2 per main service activity. So now, if we go into the SB2A main service approach, basically it's a 5-step methodology that translates companies' alignment with the Paris Agreement and the 2 degrees or 1.5 degree scenarios. So first, what we do is we will compute the carbon intensity of a given company, either through modeling based on financial flows, or through reported data, thanks to the job of our analysts. Then for the year we have some historical years, and we extrapolate all the missing years. So either if there are like some gaps in the history, or more often to extrapolate in the future emissions. After that, we associate this trajectory we define for a given company to a reference trajectory specific to every sector. So a given company can have several sectors. So here we talk at the sector level of the activity of a company. And for every sector, we compare the reference to our extrapolation and our modeled trajectory to estimate a carbon budget overshoot or undershoot that we will convert into a temperature. And once we convert the temperature at the sector level, we aggregate it across all sectors of a given company at the entity level. So the first step, which is to compute the carbon intensity. So this is the left-hand side of this graph, where you have like all the historical years that are the pink cross. And so we have a trend that we can extrapolate into the future. So this will be the gray line, dashed line, basically, which give a first estimation of how we can forecast future GHG intensity of a given company. But that's where also we take into account SBTi, is we look at all the certifications, all the certified targets, basically, and we put them into our model to consider them and to have another kind of extrapolation of future GHG intensity. But because we don't take the growth company for taken, we compare basically the previous behaviors and engagements of the companies and what they actually did to weight our choice between following either the company targets or only the historical extrapolation. So if there is no targets, we will only take the historical extrapolation. But if there is a target, we will take a pathways in between. And that's the retained trajectories in green that you can see here. Once we have chosen a given trajectory, now we need to compare it to a reference. And to define this reference, we do it based on the sector. And so we use different kinds of data depending on the sectors. So here again, we use SBTi methodology and reference framework for some sectoral decarbonization approaches. So for some sectors, they basically define ideal and Paris compliance trajectory of decarbonization. So that's the reference we will take. But for other sectors, this kind of reference do not exist. So we need to create our own, based most of the time on sectoral data, but also on internationally recognized frameworks and agencies like the IEA or the IPCC. So now we have two trajectories, one reference, which is the light blue one, and one company's trajectory, which is the dark blue one here. And we compare basically the ratio of the carbon budgets over the entire period from 2010 to 2050. And this comparison can be represented here by the area basically in between the two curves. And this comparison and this ratio is converted into a temperature. And that's the SB2A temperature main service for a given sector. But as you can see on this case study with Danone, a company can be across several sectors. For example, here, there is a food sector and water sector, and for which they have like two different temperature and two different trajectories on this specific to this sector. And so they will have different temperature associated to it. And then we aggregate them at the company level based on weights that are defined from the revenues of each sector. So this is, we come back using financial weights here.
Very clear. So I think we understand the granularity of our indicators and the methodology. But so how does it compare to SBTi?
Yes, because actually we use a lot and we base ourselves a lot on SBTi methodology, but the SBTi also give ratings and temperature to companies, but we chose to use a different methodology to actually define the temperature. Why that? Because on the reference trajectories, we find that maybe SBTi can be a bit too coarse and not granular enough. So indeed they use 10 specific reference trajectories across 7 listed sectors, but for all other sectors that are not listed, it's only one generic reference. While on our side, we have like 34 main sectors, which we decline into sub-main sectors and sub-main services. And in total, we have up to almost 2050 reference trajectories. Concerning the time frame also, SBTi will only take into account the target. So there is conditions to certify a target, but once it is certified, the temperature will be given only based on the targets and not at all on the historical behavior. On the opposite, because the SB2A is based on the carbon budget between 2010 and 2050, we consider historical emissions from 2010 into the indicator of SB2A. So we consider the historical trend while SBTi does not. And finally, in case of no targets, as I said before, we use the historical trend. So we have different SB2A indicator for every company, so that we are able to discriminate company in between them, even if there is no SBTi targets, while SBTi will automatically rate the company with the same temperature, which is 3.2 degrees. So here is a small example of this non-listed companies, so this other sector, which regroup very different sectors. For example, in SBTi, in other, you will have asset management, household goods, or food, which are all different sectors in Iceberg Data Lab database, and with their own references that are built like specific to every sector.
Thank you, Thomas. So now we'll turn to you, Leif, our product manager. So how do our clients use this data once they've got the temperature element? What can they do with it?
Yes, thank you, Thomas. Yeah, I want to start also by coming back to the differentiation that we just made, because of course the difference in methodology is also due to the difference in use case and what you do it for. So SBTi, as we know, was developed for companies to approach this organization and set their own targets and follow through on their own. So it needs some level of simplification, whereas our products are strictly from us to financial institutions. That means we don't talk to the companies themselves, we only collect their data. And we also don't need to make it kind of understandable at the most detailed level to all of the different companies, but rather create outputs that then the investors can use in a more simple manner. But we can basically make the model as complicated as we think is necessary. because it's not used by other parties. And then what comes out of it is, in first degree, the temperature that Thomas already mentioned. And we can produce this temperature as, of course, for a whole portfolio. So that means it's a weighted average of the different components of your portfolio, depending on how much you invested into each company that contributes to the overall score. Then, of course, you can also go one level deeper and look at, okay, but within my portfolio, how are different sectors performing? What is their score? And is that what is to be expected? Because what IDL also delivers is sector averages that are based on our whole universe. And then you can compare your portfolio to what is expected from a specific sector in the universe. And then lastly, on security level, so we all talked about the companies here, publicly listed ones, but IDL does also produce data on governments in case that you hold government bonds. You can also assess their impact. And that means that in the end, you can go down to the specific security and even understand the different values or SB2I temperatures per subsector. So that's what Thomas explained earlier, that we don't only provide one number, we also do, of course, but then you can also go further down and say, okay, but which activity of this company is actually causing the impact? And what we thought would be helpful now to enrich these offerings that we already have by the SBTi. So we will also produce the SBTi values. We can basically reproduce the code that they publish. And thereby you can even have both next to each other and see sometimes the differences are also the similarities. Now that's kind of the idea. Then what you will do with this data, there's different use cases, which will go also into more detail about with actual use cases. But just generally, you want to look at who's best, who's worst. Some people might want to engage with the best. Some people might want to exclude the worst from their portfolio. You can build specific funds. You can claim, for example, that your fund is aligned if you think that the methodology behind is solid enough. And that's what we propose, basically, very solid methodology. Or you can also hedge against risks, of course, of environmental risks. There's other products that do this in an even more direct way with risks, etc. But of course, having a high temperature in certain scenarios is a risk in itself, or having a very high greenhouse gas intensity, let's say. So let's look at how we actually present the results. So this is just a kind of a mock-up, but what we will do right now is to actually go onto the platform that we provide to all our clients for them to upload portfolios or even just have a look at specific companies. So I could also go up here and look at the known. But what I want to do right now is look at my portfolios. I've uploaded a couple of examples here, and here my goal is to create a portfolio that is aligned with the 2 degrees goal of the Paris Agreement. And so I go inside. I see a couple of indicators that have to do also with other products, but mainly I see the 2.9 degrees, which unfortunately means I'm not currently aligned. And if I look into the historic data, I can even see that I'm not even improving, but doing worse than the years before. So something must be wrong. And that means, okay, I'm not where I want to be yet. So I'm going to drill one level deeper, as we said before. And I'm going to have a look at the actual values. So we see here a little reminiscence of the start of the webinar with the different categories, but maybe we're going to go right into the details and see at which companies are actually the worst ones. And since there's a lot of them, the idea for today was to look at something that's kind of in the news right now. So that has to do with AI and tech companies building big data centers, because traditionally these companies would be thought to be very well aligned. They had kind of low environmental impacts. You only need some PCs and electricity, basically. But with the arrival of huge data centers, or more like calculation centers, I would say, that is not the case anymore necessarily. So we can see here that meta platforms, for example, have a very elevated value of 5.5. So that's close to the maximum. And now we want to go and see why that possibly is. So in the very beginning, you see a CBF, that's a biodiversity indicator, because as we said, that's one of our main flagship products. But actually want to go down here to the SB2A, so the temperature. And what is there first is the carbon intensity of meta platforms in their media activity. So it's almost zero, and that means that can't be the reason why their overall performance is so bad. They're way under the reference trajectory. So we're going to look at something else. Electronics, also not a huge part of their business, but with the meta glasses, maybe a little bit more. And we see here, okay, there is a negative influence of this sector on the score, because, or negative in the sense that it's making it higher because they're overshooting the goal consistently. But still, we don't think that this is going to drive the performance of our portfolio, because our portfolio, as we saw, was even getting worse. So there must be a negative change here. The overshoot seems kind of stable. So we look into the last sector and we see in IT services that actually the gap between what would be expected for 2-degree alignment and what they actually do is widening. Just a little side note, Meta Platforms is currently trying to get some objectives validated. So if they actually do that, then this curve would look a little different and it would go downwards. But right now, since they have no validated goals according to the SBTi methodology, we don't take it into account what they claim about future lower emissions, and we extrapolate their historic ones, which leads to this gap. So one way now would be to, if you just want to be radical, to exclude them from your portfolio. You could also look a little more into, okay, is IT services really driving the impact? Look into the different sectors that they're active in and how much revenue they make, but that's maybe a little off topic of what we wanted today. So let's go back at our examples, I want to say. And now the question is, okay, this seems very nice, but have people actually done that? And the answer, unfortunately, is yes. So one client of ours, Amundi, they have published their 2023 climate report with direct reference to the SB2A. That is one example. Another one is the ERAF, so the French civil servant retirement
pension fund.
Pension fund, exactly.
ERAF.
Yeah. And they have, instead of just looking at the values, they said, okay, maybe let's go a little more into detail and see what groups of performers we have in our portfolio. So the light blue ones would be the very good ones that are even below 1.5 degrees. And then the light green ones are the medium class, and then the dark green ones are the ones that are maybe not performing so well. And they saw here a solid improvement. So even if maybe your portfolio is not aligned yet, you can still track if you're on the right way. And they've in fact created a TCFD report with this, which is a framework from the EU to kind of guide investors on how to report on these issues. Last example is Amundi again, because we also want to emphasize that, of course, you have this easily interpretable value on the bottom left, but you also do get a lot of detailed emissions infos with this product. So you have the GHG emissions per scope for different activities. So if a company, so that's on portfolio level here, different sectors, but you also do get their values for different activities that they carry out. So there's a conglomerate like LVMH that do drinks, but also textiles. You can differentiate between the business units. And yeah.
Very clear. Thank you, Leif. So, gentlemen, I think it was very clear how, Thomas, you showed the scientific backing of our methodology and how deep we go, how further we go in comparison to SBTi. And Leif, thank you. You showed how our platform enables our clients to see aggregated data, to do sector allocation and company selection based on a specific indicator. Today it was temperature alignment, but we have other indicators, biodiversity, etc. So, and by the way, this is the last days of our platform. Next month, we'll have a brand new platform, new version that will be released for all our clients. So, and with much more functionalities and much more clarity for the investors. Thank you, guys. We'll meet you next month for a new webinar. We'll either show the new platform or another big release that is coming up at Iceberg Data Lab. It's the asset geolocation. So on our new platform, you will have the ability to spot if an asset is problematic for a company. That means located near or within a sensitive area, natural sensitive area. Thank you very much. Have a good day, everybody. Bye-bye.